All right, time for our bi-weekly conversation with Farhan Zaidi. Farhan, how are you?
Hey guys, doing well?
Good. So, to the best of your knowledge, what the hell happened to the offense after 2 months of the season? I can't figure it out, but this was one of the better offenses in the National League, and then it just ran face first into a wall and never really recovered at any point. I thought it would, it didn't. I mean, in your mind, like, what happened?
Well, I actually already have an admission to make. I lied 2 seconds into the interview because I said I was doing well, and I'm not.
I kind of well.
I don't think any Giants fans are. I mean, it's been, a rough couple of months, and what's as frustrating as anything is with all the ups and downs. When we left on this last road trip, we were in a playoff spot and had a chance to take it home, and we didn't. When. Yep. It mattered the most. We played our worst baseball when it mattered the most. And, on your specific question about the offense, I don't really have a great answer for it. I was on Twitter, my favorite pastime other day. And, somebody tweeted out that, there's six teams with 5 guys with 20 more homers or something like that. And they're all playoff teams other than one. And I remember us at the beginning of the year talking about how we felt we had 5, 6, 7 guys who had 20 homer potential, and you look at our home run leaderboard, and we've got a lot of guys in that 15, 17, 18 range, and I think that's a little bit of the story. We just kind of came up a little short. To your point, we stopped hitting at a time of year when a run here or a run there could have made a lot of difference, but I think we've got a lot of assessments to make as an organization on things we can do better, again, that 20 homer mark and where we thought we would be at the end of the year and where we really are, I think that's just an example of how we've just come up short in a number of dimensions.
It felt like the plan last winter was to sort of spread money around to veterans and then hope you'd get an influx of that young talent, which we saw at the big league level this year, and they would be some supplement or some complementary players. Does the way you went about it and the way this season played out dissuade you from having a similar approach this offseason?
I think one of our big goals that we've already talked about is, any additions or how we go about putting together the roster this offseason. We're going to focus on guys who have a chance to be here for a long time. So obviously, to your point, signed a couple of guys to shorter term deals and, got some good seasons, some guys who, didn't do what we had hoped for. But I think as much as anything, we're at a point now where we're hoping for, and I think our fans are hoping for, continuity. So whether it's guys coming from outside the organization that we're going to have for a long time, or our own young players who have a chance to be in Giants uniforms for a long time, that's going to be a big focus of ours is to start really building pieces that are long-term pieces and, not just guys who are going to be here for a year or two.
Here's what really jumped out to me over the course of the season, that the team at the end of the season last couple months started to look old and unathletic, and it seems in today's baseball, you just can't be unathletic. You got to give yourself a chance to use your athletes, whether it be on the base paths or in the field. I know you wanted to get more athletic last year coming into the season. It didn't really pan out that way. Is that something you'll be looking at for either the young guys will obviously be more athletic, but the guys you bring in, is that something you want to see? Like, we have to get guys that are more athletic because it's just, in today's baseball, you can't do it this way. Because if you don't hit home runs, that's what happens.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're last in Major League Baseball in stolen bases. That really stands out to you. You go when you look at your team, you're going category by category. It's easy to think certain things are issues, and then when you kind of dive into the numbers, maybe you're not quite as bad as you thought. You're kind of middle of the pack. But the stolen base number is a smoking gun. We're last place, and we had one guy, Thairo Estrada, who, stole bases in chunks for us. And that's a big part of the game. It was with the rule change of something we anticipated. And, that's going to be a big goal of ours is get closer to at least the middle of the pack in stolen bases. Some of that is mindset and strategy. Some of that is having the right personnel. Because I agree, when you looked out at the field, when we were on the bases, our outfield defense is a big example of that. The contrast with some of the other teams that we played stands out. And look, there are things we did better than other teams. There are places we came up short. And I think athleticism on the bases, and particularly in the outfield. Those are areas we need to get better for sure.
Yeah, I would say this is when it hit me kind of throughout the course of the season, Farhan, but when it really hit me was watching the Arizona series, where there were some balls they hit that could have been outs that were turned into doubles, and some balls you hit that could have been doubles that were turned into outs. And I know I'm using an extreme example because that may be the most athletic outfield in the majors. I mean, they're really young, really athletic, really good, but it kind of jumped out to me, but like that's the way the game is going, and it can't be about station to station anymore, especially in, with no shifting. You got to have more range, but that's a series where I was like, gosh, these guys, like that's kind of where you want to go, and hopefully some of the young guys next year will come up and play a more prominent role, and they'll be more athletic, and just by virtue of having those guys play, you'll get more athletic.
Yeah, that was really a do or die series for us. So to see that kind of contrast, at a point in time where you were just in must-win situations, and I agree with you. I think that dynamic impacts not just the bottom line of the game, but the psychology of the team. When your pitching staff sees a ball fall in and then sees the other team's outfielders catch that ball, and by the same virtue, your hitters are seeing doubles turned into outs that they saw fall in against themselves. And so, it becomes really glaring. There were certainly a couple moments in that series where it felt like, their athleticism in the outfield in particular was just the difference. Even though the final scores of those games maybe weren't that close, it's just, you have moments in games where, if you catch a ball or you don't, it can make all the difference in the final score and the way the rest of the game goes. So I think that's a totally fair assessment. And, our outfield defense this year was better than last year, but it's still not good enough. We got to do better there, and we're seeing that with other teams in our division like the D-backs too.
Yeah.
Talking to Giants President of Baseball Operations, Farhan Zaidi, on the UMA guest line. Final time we're going to do it this season before the end of the year. I know I asked you a couple of weeks ago. It's been a tough couple of weeks. I mean, a 500 record might have got you guys into the playoffs, and we'd be having a different conversation. Has anything changed in terms of the intent as Gabe to return as manager next year?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think, as I said at the time, really appreciate the support from ownership and the plan to have us both back. And, right now our focus is just kind of getting through these last three games, finishing strong, finishing at 500. And I think we all just have to look at, how we can improve across the board. That's the personnel on the roster. That's, our culture in the clubhouse, which, again, I think when you're playing well, certain things culturally are portrayed as like, hey, this group loves being together. They're having fun. But when you're not doing well, then those things can be seen in a negative light. And I just think we have to look at everything. And there's sort of a time and place for everything. I've been talking to a few people about how, 162 games is a grind. And, we want our players to be comfortable and, be able to wash off some of the tough losses and things like that. But, when you're in do or die games like those games in Arizona, you want them to feel different. And I think we're really going to have to ask ourselves if we were prepared to sort of elevate our level of focus and play, for those games that really matter down the stretch.
This is something I know we kind of went back and forth at throughout the course of the year, but it started off well, didn't end up well. The piggybackers, or whatever the hell you want to call those, but literally it was Cobb and Webb, and then after that, who the hell knows for like three starts. And I gotta think with the guys coming up out of the minors. And no matter who it is, like that can't happen again next year, can it? I mean, it's got to be more. There's got to be more stability, because to me, one time through a 5-man rotation, okay, maybe, but not 2 or 3 times through a 5-man rotation. I mean, that can't be a way to go through half a season.
Yeah, I think two things that have really been under the microscope, especially as just candidly, the wheels have come off the season for us is one, the managing of the pitching staff and, the use of the opener, the O word. And, on the position player side, the platooning and some of the pinch hitting that we do, I just start on the platooning. There was a really interesting article in the LA Times today about Jason Hayward. I don't know if you guys saw it.
I did, I read that.
Yeah, the role he played for them and how sort of platoon heavy their outfield was this year, and it pointed out, he didn't have a single start this year against the left-handed starting pitcher, and in his 93 starts, he got pinch hit for 40 times. So and obviously, I think we've all seen a lot of the Dodgers. We know that team is driven by Mookie and Freddie Freeman, and maybe that gives you a little bit more latitude to mix and match with the rest of the roster. And that's one thing we're going to have to figure out, because I know there's been some concern about that. I think there's examples where that can be part of how you get the most out of a roster on a really good team, but maybe you do need those frontline players who are playing every day and giving you an opportunity to mix or match more in a complementary way and not as, just the thing you're doing throughout the roster. And then on the opener thing, it's sort of the same thing. I think, it's sort of a necessity in the modern game when you run out of starting pitching and you're trying to patch things together. In our case, we had some guys struggle out of the gates, and, we're just trying to figure out a way to be as effective as we could be in getting 27 outs. And going back to the point I was making about, looking at sort of overall how you ranked, I mean, our pitching was really good when you look over the course of the season. We had, I think, the lowest walk rate in baseball, had a pretty good strikeout rate, kept the ball on the ground, and that's where I think the defense hurt us a little bit. But, we're going to have probably Beck, Wynn, and Harrison starting the games this weekend. Those guys have all shown flashes, and the more young guys we have who we can plug into the rotation, who can be those guys who take the ball every fifth day, I think the better we'll be. I mean, we've talked about it before. That's our hope, goal, expectation is that, we have a stable starting rotation, and that just makes all the pieces fit better.
Real quick, because I wanted to ask you about that. When the guys didn't get off to a good start, like at what point do you say we give them a few more starts before we start implementing this plan? Because it seemed like what happened in a couple cases was they didn't get off to a great start. Then when they were either an opener or the second guy coming in, piggybacking, or again, whatever term, they pitched well. And then the story was, well, you don't want to move them because they're pitching well now. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. What is that? Because they're coming in the third and pitching well doesn't mean they can't pitch well starting the game? Like that just didn't make it. It wasn't you guys. It was just that's kind of the story. And I was like, well, that doesn't make any sense. If you're pitching well, maybe you should start. Like I thought Manaea had an opportunity there the last month or so, or maybe even month and a half. Like he was pitching well, and he started a little bit recently, but I thought he's a guy that could give him 5 innings the way he's pitching. So was there a thought that if somebody's pitching well, you don't want to like upset it? Like, because I don't know that I bought that one, to be honest.
Yeah, look, I think it's fair as we kind of post-mortem this year and look at things we maybe could have done differently. I remember Sean really started pitching well leading up to the trade deadline at the end of July. He had a couple of great outings where he threw, 4 or 5 quality innings for us, in games that he didn't start. And there could have been an opportunity to move him into the rotation sooner. And so I think the critique is fair. Is that something we should have moved more quickly on rather than feeling like, hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it? I mean, around the time that he was pitching well, August 3rd, we're 12 games over 500, so it felt like things were going well.
Mm-hmm.
And, maybe sometimes when things are going well, you do get into that mode like you talked about, Tom, of if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But, there's maybe got to be a little bit more sensitivity to the roles guys want, the roles they're most comfortable in, and figuring out the right way to reward guys, when they iron out the kinks and get them back to what they're most comfortable doing.
Farhan, just before we let you go, a thought on and I want to keep this in context. Logan Webb's comments from after his game the other night, brilliant performance from him. But he was asked about the underperformance of the team, and then he said we've got to make some big changes to create that winning culture. When a leader of the clubhouse says something like that, and a young leader, I mean, he's now signed a long-term extension, and he's, I believe, the only guy signed like through 2025 or 26 right now. That sort of, I feel like that makes waves, and I don't want to make it sound like he's calling everybody out because he was asked the question, but as a baseball ops guy, you hear that from one of your leaders. What's your immediate thought, and have you talked to him about it?
I was actually really happy to see his comments. I mean, happy maybe is the right word.
I hear you. Yeah.
But I felt good about it because you want to feel like you have standards, and we haven't met the standards of the San Francisco Giants the last 2 seasons. And, if he's calling people out, people should feel called out. I should feel called out, because I'm responsible for this team and the success of this team. And, we haven't been at the end of this year or last year where we want to be. So, I think, when he says big changes, that can come in a lot of different forms.
Sure.
We need to rethink how we're thinking about players, how we're thinking about putting together the roster. Our players need to think about the culture that they're fostering. Our manager and coaching staff need to think about the culture we have in our clubhouse. I think we got to rethink everything. So I'm glad he said that.
Yeah, I think when you got a leader and a young guy who seems wiser than his years and all he wants to do is win, who has that mentality and that attitude, I think you take that as a luxury, and you got to listen to what those guys say. Farhan, we always appreciate the time, man. You don't have to deal with us until next spring, I guess, when we get back after it. But have a good rest of the end of the season, a good off season, and we'll talk to you later, man.
All right, really appreciate it, guys. Have a good one. Thanks
So much, Farhan.